Destruction is always secure, and it begins today. 0 day. It's time for a hard reset.
Oh my god.
Watch Dogs is one of those series which began life on the back foot due to its visual downgrade all those years ago. Then it was followed by a sequel that shifted locations and replaced the main characters of the first game, such as Aiden and Geordie, with those of Marcus, Raymond and others. It took the somewhat serious nature of the first outing with Aiden and toned it back. Now, Watch Dogs 2 was often seen as the superior game, but it was the first one which I enjoyed more. But now we have the third game in Watch Dogs Legion, and once again, it changes things up in various ways, more than ever before, such as in locations, characters, and general gameplay and missions. Whilst playing Watch Dogs Legion on both the Xbox One X and Xbox Series X, there are things about this game that I pretty much adore, whereas at other times, it left me scratching my head and just walking away from the game. The third one in the series also has me questioning where the series goes from here. Does it change everything once again? Does it go for more of a traditional campaign? Or does it enhance and evolve the ideas laid out? If you enjoy the video, then please subscribe, like, share or comment, but let's now visit a near future London in Ubisoft's Open World Hackfest. This is Watch Dogs Legion. As one of the first cross-gen games, many will be buying this to see what the PS5 or Xbox Series X and S can do upon launch. And Watch Dogs Legion is a good looking game overall, but it's recommended to play on next-gen systems if possible. Having tested it on the Xbox One X and the Xbox Series X, I wouldn't be recommending it at all for those on base systems, as even on the One X, the game can struggle. Regular dips in frame rates and stutters, especially when driving, plus the addition of some screen tearing as well, which is so distracting, and all this just becomes worse when driving, where it's never really smooth, especially at night or when there are a lot of trees on screen at once. If we flip over to the Xbox Series X version, then it's basically the opposite, where it doesn't seem to be pushing the hardware at all. All the issues with the One X version are completely gone, and I never experienced any slowdown and never saw a dropped frame. The first time playing on the Series X, and which I couldn't get footage of because there was an issue with the DVR feature of the console at the time, was walking out of my base onto the street at night and could instantly see not only how smooth it was, but the huge amount of puddles and everything being wet, which showed off the ray traced reflections, which looked fantastic. Seeing everything perfectly reflected in puddles, windows, or watching the world fly past on the reflective surface of the car's roof, it gives much more realism to the game. Once we see the reflections on large bodies of water, such as the lake, they don't look quite as good due to the distance in which the ray trace reflections are being shown and the amount of them, and they can sometimes look a little low res, but overall having the feature is much better than not, and the game can look truly gorgeous at times. It is disappointing that the frame rate is only 30 frames a second, as a 60 frames per second mode would just make everything so much smoother, and hopefully this can be patched in later for the more powerful systems. But at least on the Xbox Series X version, it is locked at 30, but the One X could use a performance mode to lock it at 30 as well, as the system is definitely being pushed a bit far. It may be just a matter of lowering the resolution to maintain a more consistent performance target. Textures are all quite well detailed across each system I played on, and there weren't many times at all, if any, where I noticed any ugly or blurry textures which looked out of place within this huge and mostly gorgeous open world. London has been recreated so well, but it's also the inclusion of the near future aspects which not only brings it to life more, but makes it more believable in this time period. Watching citizens be bullied by Albion on the streets and where you can step in to rescue them, seeing the different types of drones constantly flying around overhead and which you can interact with, the checkpoints which are dotted around the city which you drive through, it all works together, and Ubisoft has done well to bring this London to life. Character animations themselves are good overall, but sometimes I found they could look a little stiff, but each will have differences such as their running style, for example, which will differ a lot based on their body type or age of the characters. When it comes to facial animations, these can be a bit hit or miss, with some characters looking more natural, whilst others simply look like their mouth needs to move a lot more. A little bit of a dead face thing going on. There could be some oddities when it came to a character's look and how they sounded as well, with the voice maybe not matching up quite right with the character model, and I found that some could look a little plasticky at times as well. But with the sheer amount of characters in the game world and with so many voices and appearances, it's unrealistic to expect for every one of them to be unique. But thankfully, I didn't run into very many characters who looked or sounded similar to others, which was a good thing. Being an open world game which sees you driving around, you have a selection of radio stations to listen to as well, but I found most of these forgettable, with little memorable talkback and a music selection which I found will be heavily influenced by your own musical taste, with none of them really sticking out at all for me. It has the mixture of electronic or rock, but I found myself constantly changing to another station in the hopes of finding what I felt was lacking. Sound effects were also quite good, whether it be the weapons or the sounds of cars as well, but nothing really stood out in this department. And then there is the story. Set in a near future London as mentioned earlier, the game opens with explosive devices being planted in the House of Parliament by a group known as Zero Day. Although these explosives don't go off, others do at various locations around the city, and Zero Day looks to pin the blame on the hacker group DedSec, which returns from the first two games. Due to the gravity of the situation, the government employs the services of a private military group known as Albion, who takes it on board themselves to effectively now make London a complete police state, with total authority to do as they wish, and if anyone disagrees, then they will be deported or arrested. The citizens of London are having their freedoms infringed upon, with both social and political turmoil occurring. The technological advancements of society are also having a negative impact on the workers as well. You play as someone who basically gets the band of DedSec back together as you find the leader of the London branch and recruit other members to take down Albion and other groups and rise up against a lifestyle where your every move is monitored. In terms of how the story plays out and the cast of characters you come into contact with, whether that be in person or via video call, it's all handled quite well, even if the story never really hit any great or even good heights for myself, and there are a couple of reasons why that is, and these were also my main issues with the game. The cutscenes and dialogue you'll sit through and listen to is quite good, like I mentioned, but the problem lies in the missions themselves and just what you'll be doing in this really excellently realised open world. It doesn't take all that long to notice whether playing through the main campaign or whilst recruiting new members to DedSec, which is a big part of Watch Dogs Legion, and which I'll get to soon. It doesn't take too long to realise that there are just too many missions that are so similar to each other, and they all begin to blur together, and if they were fantastic, then this would be less of an issue. But they're not all that good to begin with. When following the structure of the story and missions, it really all boils down to the same thing repeatedly. Talk to a character who will dish out some information about someone, something or someplace, then go wherever it is and proceed to try and sneak into the building or premises and hack into a computer terminal to download some information, or break into the same locations, whether they be indoors or outdoors, and extract a certain individual. As my playtime in the game increased, my patience for this constant repetition began to get pretty thin, where I found myself maybe doing one or two missions before either doing something else, such as just driving around, capturing footage, or updating the look of a character, which is so small and unnecessary, but just provided some sort of break from doing the same things again and again. The alternative was to simply put the controller down, walk away, or load up another game to stop the monotony. And that brings me to what was the main idea behind the game, and that was marketed so heavily before release, and that was being able to recruit absolutely anyone you see in the game world and play as them. Now, there was skepticism surrounding this idea, mostly around how it would actually play out, and if there would be much difference in playing with such different characters and attributes. But when taken as a whole, I found this side of the game to be quite well done at a basic level. It just needed to be expanded upon further, as it suffers from repetition as well. Walking around London, pulling out your phone, tagging other characters and seeing a breakdown of who they are, whether they sympathise with DedSec or maybe whether they have a certain type of skill or affiliation with a certain group, which can help your cause. Examples of this would be recruiting a construction worker, which allows you to use large drones which you can stand and fly around with, which will give you easy access to higher floors in buildings or able to get to rooftops, which would otherwise be more difficult and dangerous to get to. Or recruiting a member of Albion to make it easier to infiltrate areas under their control, whilst recruiting other characters as well. These can be multi-step missions, and be quite lengthy, but once you've done a number of them, you will see the similarities between them start to surface, and then it really just comes down to how much you're enjoying this gameplay loop to keep recruiting more members and trying to find some more unique skills or items. This had some great fun attached to it, and even recruiting some characters who were almost worthless and brought almost nothing of benefit to DedSec, like recruiting old grannies and watching them move ever so slowly, or having some members just randomly die for no reason. It all adds to the charm of having everyone available and being able to be controlled, and I hope we see this idea explored further in other games as well. And if you'll be playing with permadeath enabled, which I suggest you do, then this can also change the game and how you play it as well, both for better and worse. Starting with the good, you actually can grow a little attached to your characters you've recruited, and you tend to be much more careful in what you do and sizing up the dangers around you. There were numerous times I decided to rethink the actions I was going to take because the chances of me being successful were perhaps a little too low, and if this character died, then I would be one down and need to recruit more. Earlier in the game, when I was focusing on the main missions, I got down to 2 playable characters, and that's when I backed off completely and just focused on recruiting new members in order to get the numbers back up. And I was going for those with different and unique skills to each other. The downside of the permadeath, of course, is that I was doing more of the same types of missions I wasn't really interested in to begin with. And the game had a little bit of a grind in it as well. But even with that, I felt permadeath added to the game more than it detracted from it, but I don't think it will be for everyone. Permadeath kicks in after the first section of the game, and it can be switched off, but you won't be able to turn it back on again, and you'll need to start a new game to play with it on again. I found one of the biggest appeals of the game, even more so than the main story campaign, is this permadeath coupled with recruiting NPCs. You feel more of a connection to them since they can permanently die. I just wish there was more mission variety during these main missions and whilst recruiting the team. Another area Watch Dogs Legion succeeds in, and which isn't in too many other games, is giving many of the characters you can recruit a backstory that fleshes them out as an actual person, and where they can have relationships with each other as well, like 2 or more actually know each other. It's a small addition to the game, but it helps bring the world to life even more so when you can recruit those who don't like DedSec, which I'll get to soon. Players can unlock upgrades via collecting tech points, which are scattered around the environments, and these can be spent in order to have a number of different skills, and each will need a certain number of them to buy the upgrade. And some of these can be further upgraded as well. Some of the first ones you can purchase, which will be the AR Cloak and Spider Bot. The cloak will make you invisible for a short time, and the length of time you'll be cloaked can be upgraded, as can the Spider Bot, which is a necessity when it comes to infiltrating various areas, as it can move throughout vents and interact with terminals. Upgrades for this include it being able to move faster, for example. Another upgrade which is important is the Deep Profiler, which allows you to scan people, including those opposed to DedSec. It will then let you go on a side task, which will essentially make them more open to joining your cause and DedSec, and this becomes very important should you want to recruit a member of Albion, which will make moving through enemy territory much easier. When it comes to using the different weapons in the game, players can use things such as pistols, assault rifles, shotguns, stun guns, and others as well, and it's the various characters that can be recruited that will have access to a certain type of weapon. So if you're wanting to have a specific SMG, for example, you'll need to find the person who has access to it and then recruit them. And it's this and needing to recruit people, especially when playing on permadeath, as to how much you'll enjoy Watch Dogs Legion as a whole, and if you stick with it. It's the gameplay loop that will have you coming back for more or stepping away from the game due to the repetitiveness, which I mentioned earlier. The more I played Watch Dogs Legion, the more I found myself enthralled with the world itself and its take on the near future. But then I would get bogged down in the repetition, which would set in after even just half a dozen main missions. Recruiting a team is fun, and the promise of playing as any character is all here in all its glory. It just needed more variety and diversity in its missions somewhat badly. I really hope we see another game in the Watch Dogs series, as there is an excellent base here to build on top of. It's just that a lot of the freedom in playing as any character seemed to restrict the structure and design of missions, which needed improvement. If Ubisoft can refine these two aspects of the game to coexist, then the next Watch Dogs could be one worth keeping an eye on. So that's the review. Please subscribe to the channel, like, comment or share, and tell me what you thought of Watch Dogs Legion down below, and I'll see you on the next video.